Hey, welcome back to Cedar Studios. Today we're going to do something a little different. Got some coffee here. I thought we would just have a little coffee chat. Get some music. And I want to talk about something that was a big issue for me when I started web design for small businesses that I think happens to a lot of people. And the issue is over-engineering. So what's true of all business is that you want to ruthlessly identify what your bottleneck is, and then you want to solve it, because by definition, no other problem is as urgent to solve as your bottleneck. So when I started out, I started trying to perfect my internal tooling, developer experience, my build pipeline, everything, because I thought, well, then I can build websites so fast, I can maintain them so well, but I didn't have any clients. And that was my bottleneck to growing my business, not the web development that ultimately clients don't even care what tools you use, what technologies you use, they just want a website online. There are kind of 3 rules that I've come up with to prevent that, and maybe that'll help you if you're just starting out. Number 1, do not pre-maintain. You think you know what's going to work long-term for building websites, but you have no idea until you go through a lot of them. I had been coding for several years. I had been a front-end engineer before I started web design for smaller businesses, and I made so many mistakes that I had to learn just by making websites. Action creates information. There were things that I thought would be a problem that I had to pre-solve, and they were never a problem. There were things that I never imagined that could be problems that were actually big problems, and I had to figure out how to solve that. Build websites. Once something becomes a problem, then solve it. So the second rule is don't propagate improvements that you do make through this process backwards to your old websites. So for example, let's say you've done 5 websites now, and every time you're building side-by-sides, sections for the website, which is a pretty common style, and you find, oh, this is taking forever. Every time I'm kind of redoing the logic for how it's going to flow and resize its container and that sort of thing. You decide, okay, well, I'm going to build like a componentized container for this where I can put in pictures and text and stuff, but it's going to do the resizing itself. So that's a good improvement to make after you've built a few websites. But you might be tempted now to say, well, I've made this really good side-by-side. Let's go add it to websites number 4, 3, 2, 1. That way everything's up to date and then I can maintain it well. You don't want to do this for 2 reasons. First, you're only at website number 5. This might actually not be the right solution. So you don't want to propagate the wrong solution back to all your old websites. And number 2, it's going to become completely untenable by the time you get to 100 websites. And you are going to get to 100 websites if you don't quit and you keep chasing down clients, right? So what I found works well is kind of a simple rule. It's just if you touch something for an old website like 3 times and it's painful, go ahead and fix it. So if you have a client that asks you to update something, 2, 3 times, and it's like a side-by-side container, then go ahead and paste in your improvement and kind of refactor that code. That's similar to solving the bottleneck that you actually have, not some other unrelated problem that by definition is not nearly as important as your bottleneck. If you go and update a website that the client never asks you to update again, and that does happen, then you're just wasting time, right? It's not a bottleneck. But if you have a customer who always wants you to be updating their pricing page or something like that, then go ahead, componentize it, optimize it so it takes you very little time, maybe even build a CMS so they can do it themselves in the future. And then rule number 3, cleverness has a half-life. You have an abstraction today. You think, oh, I've got this really clever way to solve this problem. Well, every day it gets less and less clever and more obscure. In a year, you'll have no idea what it was. You'll spend an entire day trying to think about why you did this, and you're going to just end up ripping it out of that website anyways. So be honest with yourself. This goes back to the bottleneck thing. Can your problem be solved with a simple IDE tool, right? You might think, oh, I got to figure out the perfect file and folder organization, components and atoms and everything exactly where it needs to be so I can maintain my websites. Well, Command F exists. You can just search for what you're looking for in the project and get there instantly. I'm guilty of doing that at the beginning too. I've had people actually argue with me, oh, Tailwind's not good because the HTML gets hard to read. Great. Go and install this VS Code extension that will fold all the Tailwind styles. That looks pretty clean to me, right? Another example is the dry rule. Don't repeat yourself. It's kind of beat into developers because probably it's just simple. It's easy to recognize. But an abstraction is way more painful than just a couple of duplications. So go ahead and just do something like add a custom dupe tag that you put in your code a few places, and then before you ship the code, just do a global search for that tag. And if you say, oh yeah, I've got like 16 duplications, okay, then maybe do the abstraction, right? But if you end up just duplicating something twice, why abstract it? You're gonna come back in a year later and you're never gonna know what happened. So we talked about don't pre-maintain, don't propagate improvements, cleverness has a half-life. Now those are all solutions that aim to treat symptoms of the disease. And the underlying disease is, of course, identifying what your bottleneck is. When I began, I was doing all this development work and I didn't have clients. I needed to be hitting the phones, hitting the emails, tapping my network to see who needed work from me. And that's the thing that eventually grew my business. It was not the code. No one has ever asked me if I use Astro or Tailwind or anything like that. All they want is a good website. And they don't want anything from you if they don't know you exist. So don't focus on the development until it actually becomes a bottleneck and you're building websites too slowly. Focus on customer acquisition. That's what you need to be doing. All right, hopefully that was helpful for some of you. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to drop it in the comments. I can answer it. Maybe I'll make another video like this in the future.